Welcome to Armor of Truth Live number 341, my friends. Let's see here. It's good to be with everyone tonight. We're going to jump right into this one. I want to get this one done as quick as possible because I want as many people to see it as possible. This is a video response to the Days of Noah video titled Freedom of Speech is Not the Problem. Now, I will link this video in the description so you can see it. There's a longer form video where he gives more context. It's about 50 minutes long, 55 minutes long, which was part of his longer form shows that he typically does on the weekends, sometimes during the week. That can be 3, 4 hours, 5 hours long, and I know how that is. Now, I have to give a disclaimer before we jump off into this because our society has been so polarized, frankly dumbed down by the training and public education and the constant division and appeals to emotion from the media and in politics, that it's automatically assumed that when two men disagree on a point they both believe to be essential, they got beef. I want to suggest, and I know Dayz feels the same about this, that if your first reaction to this is to think it's a beef or it's a battle, then you have been harmonized. That means you're already under the spell of the system that Dayz explains very well in his video here. So I want to encourage us all to reject that kind of black and white thinking, to disavow that program of polarization that's already been installed into all of us to some degree. Remember we talked about this before, something like the statement, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That's not true. That's a program that runs in many of our minds. I know it ran in my mind for a long time. I just thought that was a maxim. That was just a truism of life. But it's not. That was a result of a public education system planting that seed in my mind early, or maybe from the entertainment or media somewhere. So I want to suggest to you, be careful about about your reactions to things, right? If you think you're above that kind of influence, then you are the easiest target for mind control. Dayz is my brother. I love him and I owe him a lot. And we've done a lot of work together, especially during the most disturbing years of the Great Reset. So this is an opportunity to demonstrate how those of us who are on the same side in this war for souls can work together to raise awareness and increase the quality and value of discourse on this platform. Charles Spurgeon said this: "We've had enough of clever men without consciences. Let us now see what honest, God-fearing men will do." Ezekiel 33 calls us to be watchmen. Some of us are watching out for the lives of many. But we're all responsible for warning others, including leaders. Yes, including our leaders, of the impending judgment for wrongdoing, especially when you're in a position of authority. But Ezekiel says if the watchman sees trouble coming and does not warn the people and they're destroyed, then their blood will be on the hands of the watchman. With that, let us begin. Now, it is true that we're in a new age in which the spiritual truths and healthy mythologies that once held our society together have been replaced by materialism and technocratic pragmatism. The obvious and inevitable fruits of this are algorithms deployed to control our interactions, to limit the reach of dissenting messages that challenge this new order. Dayz said early in this clip that freedom of speech is not the problem because those who control the digital public square, social media, discussion forums, just about anything online, are now allowing people to pretty much say whatever they want. However, through the algorithms that create digital ghettos or echo chambers, they're sequestering and suffocating all the inconvenient points of view. And this is true. Why has this happened? Well, the primary result of the Enlightenment was disenchantment or demystification of society. And since then, the spirit of liberty and revolution has been tied to rationalism and materialism. For several decades now, a particularly corrosive movement has marched virtually unchecked through our most important institutions. An anti-American, anti-human ideology has been allowed to proliferate among the minds of our most vulnerable through public schooling. This destructive worldview has metastasized into every demographic to the point where America no longer has an identity. Americans are no longer grounded in the foundational mythologies and truths that gave us a sense of meaning and purpose and once held us together. So with that, let's jump into, I'm going to play 2 clips, and each one, first one's going to be about a minute, and the second one's going to be a couple minutes. And I want to, let's see, there's Dayz. All right, let's start right here. This will go for about a minute.
Freedom of speech. Technological.
Hang on, man, something's audio again. Let's try that. Man, I don't know what the deal is here. There we go.
Means or technique via algorithm has afforded non-governmental corporations to circumvent the Constitution by innovating a new way to control the dynamics of communication, not necessarily the act or agency of speech itself. People, individuals, are liberated and free to say what you wish, but your ability to be heard or to interact with an interlocutor is no longer confined to the material, spatio-temporal world. It is now subject to a virtual realm, a digital ecosystem that has completely new, novel layers within it that are inaccessible to the public, that are completely foreign to those who are communicating, which renders the subject, which renders the population, the public, those communicating completely helpless with regard to communication.
Okay, let's start right there. Now, those are great points. I'm going to share a video that we made a couple years ago now, because he's referring to something that Linda Yaccarino said. She became, I'm not sure what her title is, but I forget what her title is now. But she was put in a position to be over, this very thing on X/Twitter, and she's got the World Economic Forum background and all of that. So let me just play this clip to you. This will set us up nicely, I hope, for what we've got for you tonight.
Elon Musk.
Again, what is up with the audio? I don't know. Let's see. Hopefully this will work.
Champion of free speech. Well, it just so happens that Elon hired Linda Yaccarino as the CEO of the company that he owns. She's a World Economic Forum executive.
Reducing that hateful content from being seen. How?
Guys, I'm sorry. I don't know what in the world is going on with this. There's always something going on with this. That Elon Musk met with one of the architects of the Digital Services Act, the online censorship policy from the European Union. But you heard there Yaccarino saying just what Dayz told you. Now, so obviously here on this point, I agree with Dayz. Everything is a meme, right? Kamala Harris is going to try to meme her way to the White House. Or her handlers are. But here's the thing that I'd like to point out. Goodness. There we go. Let me just get Dayz up there. That'll be... We all know that we can be affected by it, by the algorithms, by the platforms, because a lot of us, that's where we exist most of the time these days. Now, that's not a good thing. You should not exist online more than you exist in the real world. That's the first problem. This is the idea where we've all embraced a hyper-real reality, a hyper reality, and exchanged it for the truth of living on the land, being connected to the earth, being connected to other people. Nevertheless, this exists, and we have to contend with it. And we can be squelched and we can be canceled by it. But that's if we're mostly passive. I want to suggest that's not our only option here. Do you think it's possible that we can also affect it? One thing I would bring your attention to is the fact, I don't know, I would just use maybe the Sean Ryan show, for example. There are others. Tucker Carlson has become the #1 podcast in the world now. And, obviously, people watching this, people watching Dayz are going to have immediate reactions to Tucker Carlson or maybe even Sean Ryan. But my point is this. Let's talk more specifically about the Sean Ryan show. It is actually possible these days to overwhelm the official narrative in the media. This is why there's so much confusion and so much harsh response about Springfield, Ohio, and what's happening to the pets, or what's not happening to the pets, or are the Haitian migrants are they a problem or are they an asset? We're not here to talk about that today. I want to talk more specifically about this. Can we actually affect this realm? Now, I know Day's argument here is that I think I perceive, if I perceive it correctly, and please, if I get something about his position wrong here, specifically Day's, let me know. But guys, you can let me know in the comments. Because I don't intend to misrepresent Dayz here. I want this to be an opportunity where those of us who are, locked arm in arm here can disagree about something and find out how can this be fruitful. Can we also affect this realm? Or do we passively just shrink from it? Is there nothing we can do? Those of us born after JFK and before the fall of the Soviet Union have experienced a disorienting shift away from the values of our youth. The enemy's primary tactic today is linguistic overload to create a certain prevailing consciousness in the masses. Now, that's a very specific tactic that usually comes from a very specific group of people. But for now, let's leave it there. So the nature of the conflict that we've been born into could be described as four-dimensional warfare. Laura Dodsworth, co-author of the book Nudge Units, Helping Governments Control People's Behavior. The nudge units are what help governments control people. She writes, the world is a battlefield of information. There are many sides, all competing to take control of the disputed territory. That disputed territory is your mind. But among these short-term skirmishes, there are forces executing long-range strategic plans to change your mind and behavior. The first step in protecting yourself is to be aware of the forces conspiring against you. Grit your teeth and resolutely prepare for battle, because you are a soldier now. If you hold a device, you're a soldier in the information war now. Dodsworth also said in a recent interview, quote, now you can have nudge units embedded in governments or advising governments all around the world. And what they're really trying to do is change the will of the people from the top down. I'll stop there, because what I'm suggesting here in this first segment of our response to Dayz is, yes, this is all coming from top down, but what about the bottom up? Now, there's astroturf movements all around, that's for sure. But there's no democratic mandate for any of this. It is top down. So governments are sneakily using preconscious, subliminal, and covert techniques to change the way we behave, or at least to try, to make us model citizens, or to incite us to revolution. Supposedly, it's all in our best interests, but it's been done secretly and intentionally through manufactured consent. This is something that Dayz is talking about here in this video too. The idea of, none of us asked for this. Nobody really voted for this. I feel it. I think a lot of people feel it. Something dark is brewing, socially and politically. There's a feeling of a net tightening and of truth being squashed, of more surveillance, more censorship, institutions captured by woke ideology. One study in 2007 estimated that the human brain receives the equivalent of 174 newspapers worth of information every day. So that's the first thing. We're all being overwhelmed with information. And the human brain simply can't cope with all of that. So what you do is you depend on the shortcuts. We all do, right? Cognitive biases to help us make sense of the world. And I say all this to steal Dayz's argument here. This is what he's saying, right? Most people are just responding based on the way they've been programmed to respond. And I would just say, too, the public square has shifted from being about ideas to being about people, really about people's behavior. Or maybe not even about their behavior, just about people. It's about either exalting them to godhood or damning them as devils. The enemy tears down people, but we, Christians, we tear down arguments, lofty opinions, and lies. Their purpose is to destroy people, but we love people. And we love one another by challenging one another, and also by refuting lies and empowering one another with the truth. Okay, so that's the free speech side. Now let me jump here because Day's going to talk about communism. And honestly, I mean, we've been, Summer's work in researching and studying Marxism specifically has been an incredible help, asset to what we do here. So, Day's comments here about that are what I really want to focus in on. So let's listen to this. This is going to go for about 3 minutes, so just bear with it. Well, you don't have to bear with it. It's a good show, but I'll be back with you in about 3 minutes.
Now, unfortunately, they can control how we communicate with each other, how we reach each other, how we find each other. So free speech means nothing at this point. This is why they're promoting it so much.
So let me stop there because I didn't intend to stop there, but he goes on in a minute into the communism point. But I want to stop here and just make this point. Free speech, or just speech, first of all, free speech is really not a thing out here among the people. Free speech is a concept that's created in government for a specific purpose, like the government shall not, limit it, or we won't get into that. But I wanted to say free speech is more than being allowed to speak or exist on platforms. Speech is one of the primary weapons of our warfare. The gospel, truth. We have 3 weapons of our warfare. The gospel, prayer, and exposing darkness. And so it just so happens in the Great Commission that speech is one of the primary weapons of our warfare. So we should expect that to be attacked. Right? If you're a Christian, it's essential to critically examine these developments through a biblical lens and condemn actions that violate the principles of justice, mercy, and righteousness. Why do I say that? Because if we intend to fight for righteousness, our greatest weapons will be spiritual. We don't use human weapons. We don't use manipulation, political power, or influence. Paul says the weapons of our warfare are divinely powerful for pulling down strongholds, for the destruction of fortresses. What is a stronghold? It's not just the idea of a territorial demon, as you'll hear often. A stronghold is anything that stands in opposition to Christ. 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5, the very next verse, tells us that arguments and lofty opinions are lies. Our duty is to oppose lies, to expose darkness, to illuminate the path to Christ, and preserve the good and disaffect the putrid. All right. Now, let's continue.
This is why they're using it to make Musk seem like some hero. People are so distracted by oh, we get free speech, yet they're not paying any attention to the fact that we're all algorithmically controlled with regard to communication. All of us, we're all subject to it. That's the problem. Who allowed for us to be controlled by algorithms? Who agreed to this? Wasn't there a time when algorithms didn't control things as such? It's a completely new world when it comes to this type of all-encompassing technology. So all of these old ideas of communism, constitution, all of free speech, it's all deflection. If people were saying no, it's not about free speech. It's about the fact that y'all putting algorithms in everything, and you're able to control how we communicate with each other in ways we can't even see. It ain't about free speech. No, it's not about communism. It's about this new techno-capital system you have coming that's going to turn everybody into bugs. No, it's not about the Constitution. It's about the fact that you're circumventing it with your new novel technologies. Rah about communism. Communism bad. I'm not saying communism's good. But what this is, rah-rahing, focusing, preoccupation with concepts, old world concepts of communism and socialism is good for techno-capital. Communism bad, check the dialectics. Communism bad, capitalism good. It keeps people from understanding how capitalism is changing.
All right, I'm going to play that last minute in just a second, but a couple things here. Check the dialectic. I couldn't agree more. Let's check that dialectic. Because I believe the Republic is worth defending. I think it is about the Constitution. Because that's our inheritance. And if we neglect our duty as Christians to tear down lies and to forget our duty as citizens to keep the Republic, then we really don't have any hope. So we need some solutions. Right. All right, let me finish the last minute of this clip here.
Democrats are crazy libtards, so I'm going to be a hardcore conservative Republican. You see how the mind control works. Focus on communism and allow techno-capital to flourish. And by the time it's too late, you're going to realize there's massive elements of communism built within the techno-capital system that is going to transform how people make money, how people interact and communicate and exist in the world. And by that time, everyone will feel so stupid about how they spent the past 5 years arguing with people on the internet about what's better, capitalism or socialism or communism.
That's the part. That's the part where I really would like to engage with Dayz on this. And I will in just a moment. I'll answer that specifically, because I really don't think we're disagreeing. I think it might be. And I think it might be a matter of terminology. Do we really understand the terms that we're using? Because I don't think it's correct to say that communism is an old world concept. There is a 21st century version of communism that is right in front of us right now. Now, Dayz uses the term techno-capitalism. In a minute, I'm going to try to make an argument to tell you why I think it could be called techno-capitalism. That's just fine. But I'm going to try to make an argument for why this old world concept has been updated for now in a very specific way. It will look one way in the East. It will look another way in the West. And by that I mean, like, for example, in China or in Western civilization. Let me last 30 seconds or so here.
Completely idiotic. Not only are we going to be moving to this, well, we already are, with a lot of the new industries, to a type of digital capitalism. I call it next stage capitalism, not end stage, but next stage capitalism, because it's not changing in the concept of capital. It's a very Nicklandian type of future regarding capital, in that what we're dealing with now is the acceleration of capitalism under the guise of fighting communism. No, we're accelerating capitalism such that it collapses into this new type of techno-cap.
All right, that's where we're going to be. Let me make sure I get a good pause on Dayz.
Whereby currencies are transformed.
I just want to get a good pause on him.
Forever.
That's pretty good right there. We'll go with that. Again, we destroy lies. Every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of Christ. One of those extremely bad ideas, one of those lofty opinions is Marxism, is the ideology in communism. Politics affects policy, and policy affects all people. And so I believe we need to be engaged in that realm. If we don't stand firm and glorify Christ and advocate for America, remember our inheritance. I would even argue that for those of us born here, for those of us who were blessed to come here, that it is our inheritance. It's a blessing. So if we don't stand firm and glorify Christ, if we don't advocate for America's return to foundational principles of liberty, traditional Christian values, then we might soon not have anything to defend. I want to talk just a second. I got one of Jack Posobiec's books on 4D warfare. And I just want to share what he says here about 4D warfare. I don't agree with Jack Posobiec on everything. In fact, he's got the book called Unhumans, which is about the communist revolutions all over the earth. And I don't think it's a good message to call those people unhuman. Well, they're very human. Human beings are quite evil, but you don't need to reduce them to subhuman. But anyway, I digress on that. Information is an element of combat power. Jack Posobiec was involved in his time in the military in naval intelligence. So he's given some ideas here. You can just take this for what it's worth. Information is an element of combat power. Now, we know from the controllers for sure, but what about for us? The weapons of our warfare. That's language that the scriptures use. Can we think about it in those terms? Focused information operations enable commanders to gain and maintain information superiority. Is it possible for us to gain information superiority today? I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm just challenging the position. Information superiority is achieved when one side has total access to all of the available information and the opposition's access to that information is restricted. This is accomplished through a variety of means, legal and illegal. Social media is a remarkable barometer for perceiving the information environment. Pamphlets, back in the old days, played a major role in the American Revolution. Most famous of these was Common Sense, written in January 1776 by Thomas Paine. The book is written in an accessible, highly persuasive tone. It was a tremendous sensation in its day. It framed and directed the debate. Common Sense went viral because, in our terms, because it fits so well into the primary conversation at hand, the topic of the day. It was a simple summary of the situation. Paine's book presented arguments for independence to a mass audience that was highly receptive due to the circumstances. His writing was a massive success because it influenced the information environment so much that it generated a political response. Social media is like riding a wave. News cycles come and go, but it is the waves of reaction to a story in the information environment that dictate whether something will go viral or be quickly forgotten. So timing is everything. He writes here, the best equation to maximize your chances of being seen, being heard in this platform, in this environment, is equal parts reflexive reactivity and spontaneity. Can't really plan to go viral. And by go viral, I don't mean that clicks are what validate us. I just mean how do we participate in this environment? Is it possible for us to get some kind of advantage? The ability to make something go viral is determined by social psychology, market analysis, brand awareness, and writing ability. If you don't understand any of these ingredients or can't apply them correctly, you're unlikely to be read, to be seen or heard. You might have the most brilliant idea in the world, but if it's too long, if you write like I do, and you can't write anything less than 5,000 words because you bloviate too much, it's going to be difficult for you to be read. It's not going anywhere. He says, here is a primary tactic if you want to make some waves, if you want any chance in this environment, in the information environment. Be good, be brief, be gone. 0 for 3 right here. Tone deafness will not be tolerated in a business, and tone deafness will not be tolerated in social media. You have to make content your audience wants to share. There's no magic to it. There isn't any formula. It's simply grinding away day after day, making content and breaking stories. And I'm bringing that up because so much of what Dayz is talking about here is the medium. There's a lot more to it than the medium, and I know Dayz talks about that plenty. Now, back to the idea of engaging in this realm a little bit. What are we really thinking about here? What is it that we're fighting for something, right? In Day's message, there's something that we're thinking about. There's something that we're all worried about, mad at, focused on. What is it? I think mostly it's the fear or the awareness that someone wants to take something from us. That someone wants to keep us out of the party. So I want to say this, and this might be the most important thing that I ever say with regard to the material world. A lot of people talk about sovereignty today, the sovereignty of our nation. I would submit this, and I believe this firmly. The key to national sovereignty, to protecting America's sovereignty, is not the Senate, it's not the Congress, it's not the federal government at all, it's not the state government at all. The key to national sovereignty is local autonomy. We can't maintain the autonomy of our local and community governments if we're not in it, if we're not engaged in it. Local autonomy, that's grassroots. That's where it starts. Just this last week, very proud of my wife, who we went to the city council meeting. She got up in front of the people and just made sure that everybody there knew. You're all aware of the fact that small towns in the nation are being overwhelmed by illegal migrants, right? So do you have a plan? Do you have a plan, and do you want that? Is there anybody here that's eager to receive 50,000 Haitians? And so that was a good experience, because our city council, which is a very small town, was encouraging. But we've seen a lot of clips from city council meetings around the country that aren't so encouraging. One lady shut it down the very minute anyone brought that topic up. The key to national sovereignty is local autonomy. So I think that it would be good to think about how do we engage in the digital realm and on these platforms. And is it good to think about techno-capital or surveillance capitalism? Because that's going to affect us a lot. But our primary focus needs to be on right where you live and the people around you. Do you know who your neighbors are? Do you know their names? Do you have any plan, any sort of idea of what you would do if there was some kind of emergency? Have you coordinated any of that with you? Because I'm telling you something, in the early days of the nation, that was just a given. We've gotten away from that. We've fallen away from that. So, the key to national sovereignty, The key to taking back our institutions is local autonomy. It comes from the ground up. Because local self-government is the antidote to tyranny. Tyranny of all kinds. Tyranny of the digital space also. It starts there. Now, communism. Maybe I can Dayz a break. I don't have another graphic ready, so we're going to have to. There we go. Have to just hang in there. We'll just have to keep Dayz up there for a minute. So we heard Dayz talking about communism there, and the idea being that that's not the issue. If you're arguing communism today, or you're standing up against communism, that you're missing it. You've missed the point. That's an old world concept. Well, we need to talk about this. We need to be able to explain to people what they're seeing in the world today. Because it's not. Dayz is right. This is not the communism. It's not your grandfather's communism. This is communism for the 21st century. You could call it corporate communism. You could call it stakeholder communism. I think that's pretty accurate. Especially in the West, you would call it stakeholder communism. Of course, the World Economic Forum calls it stakeholder capitalism, but I'm contending here, it's not capitalism at all, and I'll explain that. Just bear with me. So in the West, this stakeholder communism is being forwarded and fronted through ESG scoring, through loyalty to the United Nations, loyalty to the United Nations and the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 21, 2030. This version of communism is being brought into our country primarily through corporations, which seems like a paradox if you understand anything about socialism. But they're doing it with public-private partnerships with governments and large nonprofit organizations, including United Nations, the World Economic Forum, Open Society Foundation, the Tides Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, many, many more. These are all names we know, right? This is common. But it's a version of communism that uses corporate power to achieve its goals. Now, the communists in the 1960s and 70s divorced themselves from any kind of honest loyalty to the working class. This is the age of Herbert Marcuse, the father of the New Left. He taught that the working class in America, right, we all know that capitalism worked, so the working class didn't want to revolt. There was no revolutionary class anymore because through capitalism and then through the evolution of capitalism, through liberal democracy and forming it, I'm not saying it's all good, I'm just saying this is overall what's happened. But Marcuse taught that the working class in America had become conservative, counter-revolutionary, and could no longer be relied on as the source of revolution. So they saw a revolutionary base somewhere else. And they found it, or they created it, through critical consciousness. They created it in the educated students, the young, radicalized, highly educated college students. And in specifically focusing in on the margins of society. Racial minority population, sexual minorities, feminists, other outsiders, including the mentally ill. That's where the revolutionary class was going to be created. And these groups were going to be forged together to be the basis of the revolution. So I ask you, as you look around at what you're hearing and seeing in the world today, does it sound like that those groups, those groups on the fringes of society, have they been given a special status lately? Do we see any evidence for this? In the early 1970s, Marcuse called for the long march to the institution. He called for the radicals to become the managers. But this wasn't a new idea, because Marx himself described socialism as a process that ultimately would emerge out of capitalism. Dayz used this term a minute ago, late stage capitalism. That's the idea that Marx believed that capitalism is inherently oppressive and inherently evil, that the desire for private property, in fact, is original sin. And he believed that capitalism would progress and it would be so destructive and bad that eventually the working class would be a revolution. And from that revolution would emerge socialism and the dictatorship of the proletariat. And then after that, eventually would come the utopia of communism. Now, as far as creating a revolutionary class, they have succeeded largely. They've seized the universities. They've seized the administrative state. That's the government and most of the crucial institutions. They've captured the media. And it looks like most of the major corporations. In May of 2020, do you remember when all the corporations put on their social media profiles, it was the black box or the black avatar or something for, you remember? That's what this was. So we see all this being done, again, through the ESG domain, through large asset managers, these groups, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, others. But those are the vanguard. It's a massive cartel that controls most of the world's wealth and most of the world's long-term assets, so investments. These groups have the power to keep everyone in line. They have the power to keep governments in line. And they have the power certainly to keep other corporations in line. This is what we're seeing coming out of Europe now with the ESG scores, saying that if you want to do, I'll use the example I heard the other day. If you're Ford and you want to do business, you want to sell any products in Europe, then you have to follow the ESG rules. But not only that, any corporation that is your supply chain or serves you they also have to adhere to the ESG scores. And without getting into that, it's a really convoluted. You can see what's happening. That hand is reaching down. It's a totalitarian effort. And the reason is the fact that they have this much control. They can keep governments and other corporations all around the world. We just saw yesterday in Australia. They're doing the same thing through censorship. Because in order to have access, either to capital to run your business or to start a business, or access to access in the elite realms, or to do business, just regular access to do business, to have a small business. To have access, you got to do what they say. You got to try to raise that score, not lower it. That's because the ends justify the means is a core doctrine of Marxism, which is at the core of what I'm talking about here. So there's nothing wrong with contradictions. Corporations are now just as useful to the movement as the proletariat would be in a poor nation. The people who claim to represent the middle class in America, the unions, the politicians, the corporations, etc., are called stakeholders. I think it's very interesting that in Russian that term is pronounced Soviet. The stakeholder capitalism model is actually, as we've said, stakeholder communism. Stakeholder communism is the Western half of 21st century global communism. Now, that brings us around to the obvious elephant in the room. What about China? Now, it appears that China was a joint project between the Chinese Communist Party and people like the Rockefellers et al. So old school 20th century communism had been disastrous. There's no question. They stacked the bodies about 100 million high. So they had to solve the problem. how do you get production to happen when the people are held down and not allowed to rise? So it's important here maybe to make a point that in the socialist ideology coming out of Marx, the assumption is that capitalism cannot provide for the needs of the citizens. And that's exactly right. That's not what capitalism is supposed to do. So Marx's theory was that the collective should take care of the needs of the people. In capitalism, as an economy, in a liberal democracy, the idea is to keep, get the government out of the way. The government's duty is to stay out of the way and allow the market to decide. So the goal then was to build a socialist market economy in China. Now that's a contradiction. A socialist market economy. It's what's known as a dialectical synthesis. It's a false front. You're bringing two things together because what you're looking for is the thing in the middle. Think of it like this, the political spectrum in America, just over the last 30 years. Just think back to Barack Obama's presidency when he was against gay marriage. That's 2008 up to 2012. I think he changed the tune after that, but you know, it's not that long ago. Today, the Republican Party not really putting up a fight. Actually for gay marriage. Not really putting up a fight on abortion right now. So everything has moved to the left. This dialectical synthesis has moved everything far to the left. And so in the economic sense, this false front market is what they created in China. A market that aimed to increase socialist control. But not for the collective, really. Their solution was that the government would own the land, and since the government owned the land, they could control the market. They could confiscate your property at any time. The government would hold all the wealth, own all the raw materials. So if you don't harmonize with their ideology, they can shut you down, or they can end you at any time. Now, I submit to you, that's power and control. So the system in China has been identified as one country, two systems. The People's Republic of China and communism in the line of Marx, Lenin, and Mao, and fascism in the line of Mussolini and Hitler. Now here's the part that's going to bring it all together and hopefully make all this make sense. National socialist economic programs were established within China specifically to make this fake market work. So it's been an international corporation of individuals, institutions, including the United States State Department. You got Kissinger and Rockefeller at the heart of that, just to name a few, or to name two. And what they did was they made China into this gigantic monopoly. It's a false front Chinese socialist market economy specifically designed to be exploited. And so these Americans involved in it, they're not loyal to the United States. They're not loyal to freedom. They're loyal to one thing, and that is power. David Rockefeller and many of the major tax-free foundations. If you read Anthony Sutton's work, you can see this very clearly. Carol Quigley's book as well. These tax-free foundations, the wealthiest elite of the 20th century, have always funded major socialist projects in the world. So, China. Mao Zedong's system collapsed. It collapsed China. Now it's Xi Jinping. He's in power. And he's moving China back toward Maoism. This is where 21st century communism is happening. Well, there in the East. and in the West here through what we just mentioned. But the structure of the scam is, this is where it gets a little, I don't want to go into Hegel and too much of the dialectic, but I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible here. The structure of this scam is to unify theory and practice. The theoretical idea and the practical idea. So communism is the theoretical idea. Fascism is the practical idea. Communism is the theory. Fascism is the practice. You might say communism is the social side, the government side, and fascism is the economic side. And the purpose is the transformation of human beings away from individuality, away from the idea of liberty, life, liberty, and property, to transform human beings to transcend this desire, their own personal needs, the desires to have private property, right, which is the original sin in Marxism, and also to implement the system through fascist methods. So what you see in China today is really a fascist economic model that is subservient to communist government and social program. Now, the point of all of this is that's the goal for the world. Now, for many years, since it's over there, but since I've read Rosa Koire's book, Behind the Green Mask, I agree with her assessment that what this should be called is communitarianism. A blending of communism and fascism in just this way. You see this in the Sustainable Development Goals. When you read through the Sustainable Development Goals, you see that there is a top-down control of thought and behavior, and want to limit your movement. That's over here. That's communism is what's happening on the land. Fascism is what's happening over here inside the digital domain now, or the economic part of it. And of course, you know, obviously the authoritarian parts of it as well. The largest asset managers in the West are forcing this system on America, for example, through ESG, but more specifically right now in Europe, really forced it onto Europe through ESG, and they're forcing it on everyone through the SDGs. Corporations in the West have become a fascist cartel that is adopting communist goals. For example, why would we say this? What's the evidence? Well, the evidence is whenever you hear them talking about degrowth or beyond growth. I'm not playing any clips here tonight because I want to try to keep this as short as possible because that's hard for me. But we played a clip from Sandrine de Clève. She's the co-president of the Club of Rome. And right after that, we played a clip from Justin Trudeau's second in charge. I can't remember what her title is now. Second in charge there. And they're both talking about, we've got to go back. We've got to degrow. Degrowth. That's communism. That's degrowth communism. Why would you push your nation backwards? Why would you reduce salaries? Why would you reduce goods and services? Why would you put that kind of pressure on the people? Because the goal is to end the notion of the nation state, to obliterate the principles of life, liberty, and private property, and to hand over power to, some would say, Communist China. I might say to hand over power to a global communitarian organization. Think about, I'll try to give some more of a line here so we can think, why do I think this? ESG. Environmental, social, governance. Degrowth is distinctly a communist program, primarily under the program of environmentalism. And so the E in ESG, environment, the goal there is to degrow our economy, our energy independence, and our abundance, And then we're going to hand over the power, the hegemony, to someone, to something. Maybe it's China. I don't necessarily think it would be China, but United Nations or some version of it, with the fascist market tucked within it. The S in ESG is for social, for social justice. That score, really, the social score there, is really the same equality programs established by Lenin and implemented en masse by Stalin. We pointed out here to you in one of our shows called Climate Cult, where we took Brian Sussman. He's a meteorologist. He's scientist, one of those scientists, where he pointed out, he drew this direct line from Vladimir Lenin right up to the Sustainable Development Goals. Earth Day, established in 1970 or 71, on April 22nd, Vladimir Lenin's birthday. You can see it, right? Think reparations, affirmative action, economic equity, and a social, cultural equity program. And that's all being run to harmonize society. That's the S part of the ESG. It's importing communism through a fascist model into the West. The G, the governance score, is there to ensure that sustainability officers, this takes control of the governance of corporations and governments too. Let's make sure that these officers, these sustainability officers, are installed everywhere. DEI officers, for example, ESG officers. I think in the Soviet Union they called them commissars. A fascist corporate structure, specifically to move forward the policies of socialism. Now, you might have heard this from James Lindsay, this position. As he explains, he says, quote, "It's a fascist practical aspect linked with a communist theoretical aspect in order to transform humanity into a unified social species." That's a Marxist term. Species being. Where are my notes? Species being. Studying Marx is not all that much fun. Species being. That just means that that was Marx's idea of what it means to be truly human. To realize your full human potential. Right, the idea that no one's life should just be work, obviously, right? But he appropriates the Bible constantly. Marx asserts that humans are separate from animals. He underpins his broken system with concepts from the Bible all the time that human beings are separate from animals because we have a consciousness. And he does all this while being a staunch eugenicist. But again, I point out to you, Marxism, there's no problem with the contradictions. The ends justify the means. We will lie, cheat, and steal all the way to utopia. We will meme our way to the White House. Marx believed that man was to use his labor only to be creative, for himself. That's what he means by alienation. Two big points of Marxism are alienation and oppression. The working class is alienated from what they produce in manufacturing or in labor. Marx also believed, and this is a core doctrine of Marxism to this very day, that man's original sin is the desire for private property. Now, the Bible contradicts all these notions, and I won't get into the biblical understanding of work. Work is good. But anyway, when you understand this, the mystery of the elites and the great transition, or what we've been called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, begins to clear up. The turmoil begins to make sense. Much of what we're seeing everywhere, especially through the media, through the hyper-real Black Mirrors, is are fake divisions that are designed really to make you think something is happening that's not happening, but what it's really doing is extracting more wealth and freedom from the West and endowing the left with more power. You know, we could see old school commies too. What Herbert Marcuse called communists of strict obedience. We showed you a clip of those a couple weeks ago in Chicago when the DNC was there. This communist group was set up, old school, communists of strict obedience. But these don't realize, this is what Dayz is talking about, this old world concept of communism. They still exist, but they don't realize their utopian dream, their religion, their ideology has gone. It's not there anymore. It's passed them by. They become obsolete. That is the obsolete denomination of the religion of communism. Now, another thing, James Lindsay said, the new denomination of communism is faces like Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Larry Fink, Klaus Schwab, and I would add to that the likes of George W. Bush, Dick Cheney. You know, we've got this recently, all these Republicans coming out in support of Harris, who, you know, old school neocons. That's because they represent that fascist aspect of the movement. That's why they call Trump the fascist. The fascists are really in their movement. The true fascists are really in their movement. This is why we say you can tell what a group is, who they think they are by the words they use to describe their enemies. And when they use far right and fascist, it's a little bit telling. But this is because these groups, the ones I just mentioned, the political elites, Larry Finks of the world, these asset managers and these politicians, they're going to become, they believe, the rich masters of the fascist practical aspect of this entire program, which will slowly begin to allow, as Lenin put it, the state, the nation state, to wither away. We need to call it out, but we have to be able to explain how it operates in this form. And so just to simplify it all, the theory is communist, the practice is fascist. They come together in a single synthetic whole that's meant to be the absolute communist system. Right? We've got theory and practice, and according to Hegel, the idea is to the absolute concept. The theory is communist, the practice is fascist. They come together in a single synthesis that's meant to be the absolute communist system that's going to transform the world, or so they believe. All right, that's right at 1 hour. I want to finish up though with this. Why should we engage as opposed to staying out of the political realm? Now, I think this is an area where Dayz and myself, and probably a lot of folks who watch our channel, certainly a lot of people who used to watch our channel, we differ on this. Because as long as I have a voice in any kind of platform, or if I'm just wearing a sandwich board down at the mall, I'm going to be encouraging people to get involved with their local government. Don't let it run without you knowing what's happening. That's what it means to be free. That's what liberty is. You have to protect it. So this is why we should engage, because disengagement, just saying that it's something we shouldn't be involved in because it's corrupt and it's evil, or it's corrupt and it's evil and it doesn't matter if I vote or if I involve myself with it. When we think that way, we're conceding ground to lies. We're conceding falsehood. We're conceding to oppression. Our scriptural mandate is clear. Tear down lies. Expose darkness. We're called to engage actively, knowing that while the battle might be difficult, it might even seem impossible, the truth of God's word is our ultimate weapon. And it is capable of tearing down strongholds and transforming hearts and minds. That's the point. We don't engage the local government because we know we're going to save America. We do it because that's how God has decreed to transform hearts and minds through his people. Even in a flawed system, political disengagement cedes control, just cedes the power over to those who just seek to further manipulate and entrench their own power. Silence and passivity only reinforces the dominance of those who oppose our values, and which, of course, we know our values to be truth. If anybody holds a value that they don't know and believe it to be true, well, then that's a conflicted worldview. That's almost insanity, I think. But of course, the Christian worldview can be defended in the public square against all objections. The only worldview that can. So by engaging in politics and public discourse, then we can leverage whatever opportunities and platforms do remain, whatever institutions haven't been captured, then we can influence it. We can influence policy. We can educate other people. We can raise the awareness of other people. We can create alliances. And that is how we resist tyranny. History shows that even just small movements, small percentage of the people, can catalyze significant change. It certainly worked with establishing communism before. It doesn't take that many people. It can obviously work for good as well. If we refuse to be silenced, if we refuse to stay out of the mix, then they will keep moving. They will keep growing. They will keep growing their power. Giving up our voice means giving up the chance to advocate for justice, freedom, and truth. Those things are the most important things. The idea that a person shouldn't engage in this system because the system is rigged, that presupposes a deterministic view of society, right? That's Marx. If you're presupposing that, again, and this is not an insult, I'm just saying that it's happened to all of us. We've all been influenced by this kind of thinking. We're presupposing a kind of Marxist determinism, a view of society. You're presupposing that human agency and free will are powerless. That's a self-defeating philosophy, and it denies the capacity of individuals, particularly God's people, to make meaningful choices and to affect actual change in the real world. So if we resign ourselves to this kind of fatalism, then we become complicit in our own subjugation. So engaging in debate, getting in there on Twitter, who cares who's got control of it? If 50 million Christians invaded Twitter and with the gospel, that wouldn't really matter what the algorithm was doing. Engaging in debate and engaging in politics is an affirmation of human dignity. And the belief that truth can and must be defended against lies, against falsehood, no matter the odds, that's a good thing. And it's our moral responsibility. For any of us who see lies, we see falsehood, it's our moral responsibility to confront it rather than to be passive and yield to it. And the Bible calls us to be salt and light, Matthew 5. To actively engage, to preserve, and illuminate truth. 1 Corinthians 10:5 again commands us to destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God. That means confronting lies and distortions with the truths of the gospel. The prophets and Jesus and the apostles all engaged with the culture and the political powers of their day. Jesus called Herod an old fox. And they did this at great personal cost. Crucifixion for many of them. But anything good, anything true, good, and beautiful has value. That means it has a cost. And that means it's worth the risk. And that's what we're called to do, to resist evil, not by retreating, but by boldly running into the flames, proclaiming the truth in love, rescuing people from it, even when it's corrupt. To disengage is to disobey our calling. It's to abandon the mission field that God has placed us into. And I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, you were born to be here right now, or you wouldn't be here. And the fact that you were born to be here right now should be a great honor, because this is a crazy, weird time. Anyone who from history who was plopped down in the middle of this age would admit that. This is our time. How do you fight against wickedness in high places? Tear down arguments. Destroy strongholds. Lies. 3 enemies that we have in the world. Well, 3 enemies that we have are the world, the flesh, and the devil. And we have 3 weapons. The weapons of our warfare. The gospel. Prayer. And we have our intellect, which we use to expose evil. The only possibility for America's return to peace is a great awakening. But a true awakening won't come unless we can learn to faithfully pray for our nation, to pray for our leaders, to pray for these people who want to destroy us, especially if they're our enemies. That is a biblical principle that many, many professing Christians do not love. But the worst problem we're facing as Christians in the world today, especially in America, is this season of struggle. In this season of struggle is anger, resentment, and bitterness over everything that's happening. Expressing this bitterness and resentment means that the blessing of God is not resting on us. And I would tell you, that's exactly what Marxist, Maoist tactics are meant to do, to create resentment. Look, if the working class in capitalist America had it too good and didn't want to revolt, in fact, they wanted to defend it, well, how do you change that? Well, you create critical consciousness in the people, and you cause them to start resenting people. And within the capitalist system where everyone's well off, most of the people are well off, you create this critical consciousness. You make people resent people who have more than they do. Even though they've got it really good, you cause them to resent, especially in academia, and you've seen it happen most recently. Just an example, Claudine Gay at Harvard. That resentment. We're going to give these people that position because they deserve it, because of whatever, because of their ethnicity or whatever. But it's resentment. It's the totalitarian ideology, resentment. The blessing of God only rests upon those who are capable of blessing their enemies. Titus 3. Remind them to be subject to rulers, to authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work, to slander no one, to be peaceable, considerate, demonstrating all gentleness to men. For we ourselves also once were foolish, disobedient, deceived, and enslaved to various sins, various lusts and pleasures. And we spent our life in malice and envy. We were despicable, hating one another. Titus 3, verse 1 through 3. Isaiah 1:17 says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. That means those who don't have a voice. God's people should hold those in power accountable when they perpetuate this true injustice. Psalm 82 says, rescue the weak and needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. That is a mandate from God to confront and challenge unjust leaders. Proverbs 31. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. That means speaking out for those who can't speak for themselves. Or maybe they don't know any better. But it especially means confronting leaders who abuse their power, especially in your own hometown. But to sum up, unless we can faithfully bless our enemies, pray for them, ask God to bless them, especially when they lie, cheat, and steal, and want to kill us, then we can't expect God's blessing to rest on us or our nation. We don't get indulgences, my friends. We can't buy ourselves a free shot at Klaus Schwab or any ruler. There's no getting around the truth. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5. That's Jesus. He also said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And Jesus commands us to bless those who hate us, bless those who hurt us, bless those who gripe us. You see in Romans 12, that chapter heading that in some translations it says, marks of a true Christian. Then it goes on to say, outdo one another in showing honor. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. The Apostle Paul goes on to say to the contrary. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. By doing so, you'll heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Do you hear this? We're not only supposed to bless and pray for those who hate us, we're not allowed to hesitate. We're commanded to go to the Lord at our first opportunity and ask him to bless that person, bless his day, bless his family, bless his labors. Why would God want to bless those sinners? Remember? In the synagogue? Oh, thank you, God, that I'm not like all of these sinners. That was the Pharisee and then the tax collectors over there. Be merciful to me, a sinner. And Jesus says, that's the one who went home justified. How can I bless Klaus Schwab? How can I bless Kamala Harris? But it's not, whether or not God actually blesses them is not your concern. It's your command. Our purpose is to glorify God. And when we do that, when we're through obedience to his will, it's not for us to decide whether the person is worthy of God's blessing, because we already know that we're not worthy of it. Romans 3. Doesn't matter whether you think it'd be good for that person or not. What we know is what God has said, and he has said that it would certainly be good for us to give that blessing. And you can trust God to do the right thing with your obedience. Now, just to close up, it's certainly understandable that after enduring all of this for many years, enduring the tactics of these darkened minds, after being overwhelmed by their constant lies and deceptions, you might get a little irritated. You might get a little angry at all the nonsense. You might feel sad and discouraged and hopeless. You might just get good and pissed off. You might fire off hateful diatribes. But take heed, when we fall into that temptation, when we become reactionaries, when we allow anger to rule our hearts and bring us down, then we've fallen for the trick. We've fallen for the devil's ruse. The purpose, for example, of the 24/7 news cycle is not to keep you informed. Same thing with Twitter and all of the social media platforms. They're not there to keep you informed. They're there to own your mind and to evoke reactions, to capitalize off of your reactions. But friends, we're different. So let us be different. Let us be faithful in our duty as Christians, living as travelers, as sojourners in a great nation. A nation that is still great. And I'm telling you, this republic is worth defending. Let's don't just sit idly by and watch it burn down, because it's our inheritance. Folks, please make sure that you go and check out our The Armor of Truth Substack. My wife Summer is hard at work on Substack every day. We've got many articles that are there for you. I would just suggest right off the top here, regionalism, the threat is not to national sovereignty, but to local autonomy. Since we talked about that here tonight, that's an excellent article you can check out over there. Here's an article. This is a long article, very long. This is one of those 7,000 word opuses, I think, here. You can see there. Some are put together the bulk of this. We collaborate on some of it, but this is about the WHO is not the greatest threat to American sovereignty. The United Nations is not the greatest threat to American sovereignty. The greatest threat to American sovereignty is Americans, you and me, people who are in a position to protect local autonomy. And this is our latest article. Summer put together for us. This is one of the old ones too, from not old, but from June. The alt media has failed you. You might want to check that one out. I'll show you the latest article that we have up there. U.S. House Republicans want to remove us from the United Nations and the WHO. This is the last show we did. We showed you some clips where these senators and congressmen were very adamant about pulling the United States out of the United Nations, out of the WHO, defunding it all. And we described for you what they got right and what they got wrong, and that's all about. So let me just end up by saying, giving props and a lot of credit, sending a lot of love to all you guys at Dayz of Noah and all the audience over there. I hope this has been fruitful. I hope it's been helpful. I hope that we can, kind of maybe do more of this. Again, don't let it get twisted and start thinking that there's beef. We're brothers, and I think this is how we grow. I think this is how we get stronger. When we find disagreement on issues that we think are essential, good for us to talk about it. It's good for us to debate it. All right, my friends, God bless you. We'll see you next time.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.